Hi, Miss Finn here. I'm going to read the next chapter of our story, Sky Song. Chapter 7, Esker. There was a hushed kind of silence inside the forest. Flint's dogs nipped this way and that between their trunks. They knew their path instinctively, and they could tell they were almost home. But as Esker was pulled deeper and deeper into the trees, she bit her lip. This was a place that smelled of secrets, and if she didn't manage to win over Tompkin, she'd be left to find her own way here. She pointed to a line of large clawed animal tracks leading into the trees. What made those? Grizzly bear, Flint replied. Esker shrugged. The dogs ran on and on until eventually the trees grew so close together there was no longer a clear path through. Flint unhitched his sled, then dragged it and his huskies towards a large spruce tree. Esker frowned. This tree looked just like all the others, but as Flint slid his bear claw earring out and slotted it into the crack in the wood, Esker's eyes grew large. There was a click, then a door swung inwards, and as it did so, Flint's dogs rushed through, and Esker watched, open-mouthed, as all 7 of them disappeared, their footsteps pattering into silence. She raised a mitten to her mouth. The tree was entirely hollow. You could fit 6 people inside it. And there was a lamp burning in a bracket on the far side. Where have they gone? Esker gasped. Flint grinned, and for a moment it seemed to Esker that he had forgotten to be cross with her. He hauled the sled inside the tree, and as Esker peered closer, she saw him hang it on a hook on the inside wall. Have you checked for bears? She whispered. Just get inside, Flint hissed, and he closed the door behind them. Welcome to the labyrinth. He motioned for Esker to stay where she was. Then he hurried down some earthen steps and returned a few minutes later. The dogs sleep in kennels down below. They don't much like heights, except Pebble, but the rest of the fur tribe, Flint winked, we go up. Esker wiggled her toes inside her boots. Warmth, safety, and the possibility of friends. Her body tingled at the thought of it all. Flint grabbed hold of the rope ladder hanging down in front of them and placed the boot on the first rung. He climbed a few steps, then glanced back. Don't say we talked about inventions. Or magic, he paused. Or the sky gods. Esker clutched the rope. What shall I say we talked about instead then, if they ask? Spears, Flint glanced up at the ladder. And, killing things. Esker climbed beneath Flint, rung after rung, until she felt sure the tree couldn't possibly go any higher, but on it went, tiny lamps flickering from the wooden walls around them. Esker tried to plan her words as best she could so that Tompkin might listen and understand when he saw her. Then she realised how high up she was and began concentrating extremely hard on Pebble's head, bouncing up and down in Flint's hood to avoid catching sight of the long drop down. She stopped dead. There were whispers coming from above. It sounded like 2 boys. It's Flint, the first hissed. He's back. A second voice echoed down the tree. Let me see. Lofty, shift over. Oh, Inch, you're standing on my hand. There was a scuffle. Then 2 faces peered over the edge of a wooden platform that ran it around the inside of the tree. Esker craned her head to get a better view. The boys' faces were identical. Ruddy cheeks, curly brown hair, matching porcupine quill earrings. Perhaps they were twins, but from what she could see they had very different physiques. Where one was long and thin, the other was small and plump. Lofty and Inch, Esker mused. It makes sense. Inch squinted towards the ladder. There's someone else with him. There was a pause. Then Lofty's voice came hard and low. It's a girl, an outsider by the looks of things. Esker's knuckles whitened round the rope, but she kept on climbing. Then Flint clambered onto the platform, and as Esker followed, panting, the twins backed away from the ladder. The hollow tree closed several metres above their heads, and Esker noticed pieces of bark nailed to the walls, each one bearing carved words. Otter tread, silent claw, lone lynx, spruce wanderer, wild paw. Perhaps the names here belonged to the former fur tribe chiefs and chieftainesses. There were desks too, sculpted from wood, with bears, lynx and otters carved into the legs, and a lantern framed by caribou antlers. These were beautiful, homely things, and Esker felt she could have spent ages looking at them, had it not been for Lofty and Inch's narrow eyes. The twins hurried behind the desk and sat down on 2 high-backed chairs. Flint looked at his boots. "I'm sorry I asked you to cover for me when I crept out last night, Lofty." Lofty raised an eyebrow, then he glanced down at his desk. There were about 100 names carved into its surface in columns, and, beside each of the names, there was a spruce cone sitting in a hollowed-out scoop. Lofty picked up a cone from a small wicker basket on the desk and plonked it next to Flint's name. "In," he muttered. "And that's the last time I take the register." Inch coughed, and Flint shifted his gaze towards him. "And I'm sorry I made you lie to my sister, Inch," Flint sighed. "It was all going so well at first. I sneaked past the guards, stole into the palace, and then—" He shot a glance at Esker. The novelty of showing her the labyrinth had clearly worn off, and then she got in the way. Esker felt her cheeks burn. Inch frowned. "What is she?" "A girl," Flint replied. Lofty sighed. "I can see that, but what tribe?" He looked her up and down. "Blue eyes like a tusk, but red hair." Esker took a tiny step forward. "I'm not a tusk." She felt around for the right words. "Even though I lived in Winterfang Palace, I never once spoke to the Ice Queen. I hate her, like you, and—" "Lived at Winterfang Palace?" Lofty spluttered. He turned to Flint. "I'm used to you breaking rules, but asking outsiders from the palace in for a cup of spruce needle tea? What were you thinking?" "I wasn't planning on offering her tea. I was planning on talking to her, Tompkin." Inch's eyes widened. "Because he's going to be really pleased to see a tusk spy." "I'm not a tusk spy," Esker cried. "Sounds like something a tusk spy would say," Lofty muttered under his breath. Flint drew himself up. "Esker's not a spy. She was the Ice Queen's prisoner, and she knows things Tompkin needs to hear." Inch sank his head into his hands. "This is a disaster." Flint sighed. "Come on, let us through. Blue will be worrying about me." At the mention of Flint's sister, Lofty stood up reluctantly, and Esker noticed something carved into the wood behind where he had been sitting. The head of an enormous grizzly bear. 2 small eyes above a snout-like nose, and a wide neck surrounded by a circle of large brown claws. The fur was carved in such detail it almost looked alive, and, when Lofty flicked one of the claws beside its ears to the left, all the other claws followed suit. There was a clanking noise like gears slotting into place, and the bear's colossal jaw dropped open. Esker blinked. The way on into the labyrinth was through a grizzly bear's mouth. "Tompkin's in the swingery," Lofty muttered. "They all are." Flint took a step towards the open mouth, but Inch leapt up. "Wait! We should check her for weapons, for ice blades and axes and spears and more ice blades before we let her through." Esker picked at the cuffs of her parka. "I didn't come with anything like that." Flint nodded. "She is unarmed, and, besides, she's not the kind of girl who would know how to wield a weapon anyway. Trust me." Lofty glanced at Inch. "Scared of a pathetic little girl? Honestly, I really worry about you with the rebellion coming up." Inch sat down shakily. "I've already asked Tompkin if I can be on register duty." Seizing the opportunity, Flint stole through the bear's mouth and Esker followed. They emerged a moment later before a vast network of wooden walkways and rope ladders crisscrossing through the canopy of the trees. Esker gasped. How big was this secret world up among the branches? Dotted around the trunks of the spruces were tree houses, about 20 of them in a large circle. Some were square, some rectangular, others oblong or triangular, but each had a door, little shuttered windows and a chimney on the top. Esker gawped in awe. The forest floor must have been 40 metres below, but she couldn't see it. The trees' branches were so dense, and any gaps between them had been filled with walkways and ladders. And as she looked up, she saw that the branches closed over the hideaway, locking it from sight. Even the birds wouldn't know it was here. Flint slid a glance to Esker behind him, and, though he said nothing, she could feel his pride. She hastened after him in towards the centre of this hidden village where the biggest treehouse sat. The swingery, Flint said as they approached it. This is where we have tribe meetings. It was circular, with a turreted roof made from slats of wood, and, as Flint pulled the door open, Esker held her breath. Tomkin would be inside, and if she could just persuade him to listen to her, maybe he'd let her stay after all. Hanging from the roof were lots and lots of swings, some simple boards of wood, other slings made from animals' hide and hammocks that could hold several people at once, and the floor was scattered with caribou skins. Dozens of children, all clad in brown furs with brown hair and brown eyes, sat on the swings, their heads turned over their shoulders towards Flint and Esker, as if perhaps, just moments before, they'd been listening to someone at the far end of the room. Esker swallowed. The children were staring at her in silence, and their eyes were cold. At the back of the room, a boy stood up on a large swing hanging from rope studded with leaves. He flicked a knife up in the air and caught it with one hand. Esker felt her knees wobble. He looked so like Flint, only taller and with a harder jaw. Flint shuffled forward. "Hello, Tomkin." And at his words, Esker felt her hopes drain from her chest, because Tomkin didn't look pleased to see Flint at all. He was furious.